When a dismissive avoidant people pleases. Now, this is counterintuitive because if you've heard any of my TikToks about the dismissive avoidant, you know that it's typically the anxious attached people who will do the people pleasing. And the dismissive avoidant usually presents as, I am who I am, deal with it, I'm not going to change. But there is a small subset that will actually go to people pleasing. Leslie Wells, Connection Coach here. I help individuals thrive, heal, repair, and improve upon their relationships by looking at things through an attachment lens. So let's talk about the dismissive avoidant who actually people pleases a little bit. So if you're unfamiliar with the dismissive avoidant, go back and look at some of my other TikToks. You've got a lot to catch up on. So typically during conflict, the dismissive avoidant who absolutely hates dealing with conflict because they do not have emotional intelligence, they are not emotionally attuned. They know in a conflict that they're going to have to deal with their partner's feelings and their own feelings, and they typically are overwhelmed by feelings, period, especially those of other people. They know that they don't have the capacity to show up well. They don't know how to validate. They don't know how to empathize, and so they know that they're not going to struggle, that they're going to struggle to show up well. They also really feel criticized anytime that there's any kind of negative feedback or any conflict, and so they typically will get defensive right away, and then they will shut down, withdraw, and disassociate. And they usually will brush it under the rug and not return to repair the conflict. But there's a small subset of dismissive avoidants who will actually people please. So they will immediately apologize and backtrack and say things like, oh gosh, my bad, I didn't realize you're right. And they seem to take accountability. However, it's not true accountability. They use this as a subconscious way to disarm you, because they know that if they can say that they're sorry, that they're going to say they're going to do better, they're going to do all the things that you ask them to do. They know if they say that, then the conflict is probably going to end. And at least that's their hope, is that the conflict will end, you will be satisfied, and they can sort of move on. And they do this in almost like a robotic way. So if you're someone who is like a fearful avoidant, who is very hyper attuned to other people and how they think and what their shifts in tone, behavior, someone who's a fearful avoidant, it's really hard to BS them. So if they're with the dismissive avoidant who is saying, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry, my bad, from now on I'm going to do this, this, and this, and it's not coming from a true, authentic place, but they're doing it to just sort of brush it off and move past the conflict, they are going to know, and that fight response is going to escalate. So it's not so much that they are truly people-pleasing the same way an anxiously attached individual would do, but it's more that they are appeasing to avoid the conflict and sort of brush you off. It's a tactic to really deter the conflict, but they're not usually going to actually look deep, self-reflect, and really allow themselves to take true accountability. To be able to take true accountability for something, there's a few things that we have to do. We have to be able to look at our role in it, and we have to be able to be truthful and honest about where we messed up and where we could do better. And it's very difficult for dismissive avoidance to look inward and to self-reflect. We also, when we're taking accountability, really need to be able to understand the experience of our partner, how we have truly impacted them, and be able to sort of understand their perspective, their inner experience, and be able to put ourselves in their shoes, so to speak. We need to be able to empathize with them. And dismissive avoidants just really aren't capable of doing this. So they might say, you know what, my bad, I take accountability for it. But in reality, they're not able to truly understand your inner experience, nor are they trying to, because if they really work to understand your inner experience, then they're going to have to see where they hurt you, where they impacted you, and that is going to feel like negative feedback and negative criticism to them, which is very difficult for them to do. They don't typically have the capacity to be able to look at themselves and the ways that they are inadequate or have failed. Those are things that they're always trying to avoid, which is why they're always suppressing their feelings and distracting. So a common example of dealing with a dismissive avoidant where they would actually like people please or appease would be, let's say that they're not making any time for you, and you're like, you know what, you have a conversation and you tell them you're never available for me, you spend all of your free time outside of work with your hobbies and your friends, but you're not making any time for me. And they immediately say, oh, you know what, you're right, I really do spend a lot of time at my work and my hobbies, and I'm sorry, my bad, I didn't understand how that was affecting you, and I'm going to make sure that I start planning some time for you once a week, instead of going after work and hanging out with my friends. And then they never change, and you never see that thing come to fruition. And that's because even though they will appease in the moment, they're not truly able to avoid that spirit of rebellion that then comes back up. As they think about it later, they start to feel like controlled, like here she is trying to invade my space or take away my time for my friends or my hobbies. Like The negative thought pattern and the negative internal dialogue will kick in later, and that spirit of rebellion and feeling controlled will pop in. It's just in that moment, they want to avoid the conflict. And so the other thing with the dismissive avoidant is that sometimes they will change for brief periods of time, and then they go right back to being how they were before when they feel emotionally unavailable and unable to make the changes that you're requesting so that you feel like they're actually showing up and being present and engaged in the relationship and being able to meet expectations that you have and have emotional attunement. And the reason for this is because even like the threat of the loss of the relationship or feeling like something big can sometimes sort of snap them out of it for a minute and they start to show up better. The problem is it's not true change. They're not actually working on their nervous system. They're not learning new techniques and tools. And this is why understanding is never enough to fix the relationship dynamics or fix what's going on. You have to actually get more than just understanding. But they will basically try to white knuckle their way through it and do it on their own willpower. And that just doesn't work because eventually their nervous system is going to go back into that place where it was, and they're going to end up showing back up the same way that they were before. They have to change their internal dialogue. They have to look at the trigger cycle. They have to learn tools and techniques and strategies to move through these things and to not go into that trauma response. They have to be able to build capacity slowly in a variety of different areas, and they have to be able to do nervous system work to have a regulated nervous system to be able to show up differently long term. So yes, there is a small subset of dismissive avoidants who will people please, but while the anxiously attached individuals will people please to gain connection in the relationship, the dismissive avoidants will typically do it to just simply avoid conflict. If this is something that you can relate to because you're in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant, or if you're a dismissive avoidant and you're like, aha, didn't notice that's why I was doing that, then put relatable in the comments.